what we believe in our iman and our faith, so that it benefits us in this world and obviously the next life as well, inshallah. The primary areas that we advise in are interpersonal, social, financial issues. You have marriage validation, marriage dissolution, any disputes between business partners, any disputes between spouses, or even families, etc. So there's a lot that we cover under the guidance of some of the top ulama, some of the top scholars in the UK. So to find out more about the work of the Islamic Council of Europe, or to see how we can help you, inshallah, go to our website, that's www.iceurope.org.uk, and see what else we can offer, inshallah. Okay, so coming to the conversation, back to our conversation today, we're very fortunate to have three distinguished guests with us to discuss all of the different questions that we have. First and foremost, we have our Shaykh, Shaykh Dr. Haitham Al-Haddad. Assalamu alaikum, Shaykh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Brothers and sisters, dear everyone. MashaAllah, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. MashaAllah, Fraz, how are you? Yeah, we can't hear you.
You're muted.
Yeah. And Basit?
Assalamu alaikum, Shaykh. How are you? Pleasure to be here.
How are you? And of course, the big boss, Vikas, Shaykh, MashaAllah. How are you?
Insignificant, Shaykh. Alhamdulillah, Shaykh, how are you? Good to see you.
Alhamdulillah, very good.
And as you said, we also are very fortunate to have Fraz with us, who is the founder, a partner, and a solicitor at Saracen's Solicitor.
You said fortunate, or I heard it unfortunate?
I said fortunate, but you heard what he wanted to say.
Of course, Shaykh.
No, we definitely are fortunate. Who is a specialist in many areas of law, particularly commercial law. So, assalamu alaikum, Fraz.
Wa alaikum assalam, Vikas. Nice to see you.
Good to see you as well. And last but by no means the least, we also have Basit Khan, who is a director at Kinetic Tax and a specialist in inheritance tax. And Basit will be advising us on the tax elements and tax considerations during this conversation as well, inshallah. So, assalamu alaikum, Basit. Welcome.
Pakistan.
Excellent, good stuff. So, as a precursor, Shaykh, I was in the run-up to this session, I just did a bit of a poll on my social media groups around a few hundred people as to who actually has an Islamic will. And what I was somewhat surprised to find is that I could probably count on a single hand how many people came back with a positive response, that they actually have a will in place. And that's despite all of the attention that the will has had during this COVID experience that we're going through. So I just wanted to maybe allow you to set the scene, tee up the topic, and just sort of give us an idea of why it's so important to obviously have a will from a Sharia perspective, and also maybe give a little bit of an idea around what a Sharia will constitutes as well, what the fundamentals are.
Yeah. Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah, salatu salam ala Rasulillah. Brothers, sisters, and everyone. Maybe we might have some non-Muslims here. They are most welcome. What is a will? A will is what you want to do regarding yourself and your wealth and other matters of concern after your death. Now, everyone is going to die. This is a simple fact. But no one has any control of what things may happen after his death. And that's why, to make sure that things can run according to his own will, he or she, they should write a will. They should have a will written. And the Prophet ﷺ said that it is not befitting for any person who has something to bequest to stay 2 nights without his written will, being kept next to his head. Means accessible easily by others. And the narrator of this hadith is Ibn Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, and he's a very great, very knowledgeable companion of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He said, after that, I have never stayed for 2 nights except with my will written next to my pillow, which means accessible to others. My dear brothers and sisters, in the West, we are in need. We are actually in more need of having a will written and accessible to those people who might be in charge of our affairs after we die. Why is this? As the Prophet ﷺ said, that if you have something to bequest, if you have something not financially to bequest, but something to tell others about. And in the West, because the law here is not an Islamic law, we have so many things to tell others about ourselves. For example, that you are a Muslim. So this is the first element that you need to put in your will. You are a Muslim, you testify that there is no God but Allah Jalla wa'ala, and Muhammad is his final messenger. Number one. Number two, how your janazah should be treated. How you would like yourself, your body, to be treated after your death. And don't take it for granted. Alhamdulillah, inshallah, you will die between the members of your family or the members of the community, and they will treat you well. But believe me, I have so many stories, and Shaykh Yunus Duduwala, who is a chaplain, who might be the oldest on one of the oldest chaplains in London, he has so many sad stories to tell you, whereby some people were about to be cremated, or actually, I myself, I know of a story of a person who converted to Islam. He lives in a non-Muslim area, and he died, and his body was cremated. I mentioned in the previous seminar organized by our brothers, mashallah, from Sarah Sins, lawyers, last week, and we have, mashallah, Fraz here, this nice fellow gentleman in front of you. Okay. I mentioned that I dealt just before Ramadan with a case of a person who passed away as a Muslim, but he was not that very practicing, and a member of his family, I don't want to tell the details, they insisted that he is not a Muslim and he should be cremated. And that has to go to the court, and the court has to decide on this. Alhamdulillah that he had a written will. And in that written will, he didn't say that he doesn't want to be cremated, but he said that he testifies that there is no God but Allah Jalla wa'ala, and Muhammad is his final messenger. So the judge ruled in favor of that he is a Muslim. So this is the second thing that you need to write in your will, my dear respected brothers and sisters. The third thing that you need to write in your will is how you want your children, if they are young, to be looked after. Who should look after them? Don't take it for granted that they will be looked after by the people whom you wish. Imagine a situation, brothers, sisters, and I had this case before, that the parents, both parents, died in a car accident. Okay, and there were not many there were actually no relatives here. So the social services obviously have to look after the children, and the grandparents have to apply for the court in order to have access or custody over the children. So you need to write that in your will as well. Okay, and the fourth thing, brothers and sisters, that you like your assets to be distributed according to the Islamic law. Again, our country is not a Muslim country. The law is not an Islamic law. Although there were attempts, alhamdulillah, to recognize elements of the Muslim law within the judicial law, it is still a long struggle. But if you die, you don't have a will, then your assets will be distributed to the law of the land. And the law of the land is not the Islamic law. Brothers, sisters, if this happens, then you might be sinful, or you are very likely to be sinful, because you let your assets to be distributing according to other than the law of Allah Jalla wa'ala. Number one. Number two, your children, they will have disputes among themselves, because some of them, they will say, no, we want our assets to be, or we want the assets of our parents to be distributed according to Islam, or maybe our brother or our son to be distributed according to Islam, and maybe other siblings or legal heirs, they might contest that. And We know, we have so many stories where there were conflicts between the family members. Yeah. So you need to write in your will clearly that you want your assets to be distributed according to the Islamic law. MashaAllah, the brothers, they can advise us whether you should write the details of that, or it is enough to say that we should that the assets should be distributed according to the Islamic law. The third thing that I really recommend that you write, brothers and sisters, please listen to this, yeah, is to give a sadaqah from your assets. Remember, once you die, you have no control whatsoever on your assets. The only control you have is up to 1/3. You can give that as a sadaqah jariyah. Yeah, brothers and sisters, I read a beautiful statement by someone yesterday. He said, do you want to know how your family will be behaving after your death? Yeah, how others, those who love you, your children, your wife, your friends, your students, your even parents, how they will behave after your demise? He said, look at others who passed away and how their families dealt or behaved after that. They will weep, they will cry, mourn for 2, 3, 4, 5 days, weeks, and then life has to go. They will forget you. Yeah, I have so many cases, brothers, I don't want to talk time. So many cases of those who passed away and their children, they were fighting over their inheritance. In one case, I remember we asked them, yeah, the father has written that he wants 1/3 of his assets to be given as a sadaqah, but he said, I leave it up to my children, the discreet of my children, the approval of my children, whether they are going to implement that or not. And one, he said, yeah, we want that. This is the wealth of our father. We want to give it as a sadaqah. Yeah, 1/3, not all of it. Okay, and he left a substantial amount of money. And the other children, including the wife, they said, no, he passed away, khalas, okay, we are in need of money. So they were, too tight, too miser to spend 1/3 of the assets of their father, yeah, as a sadaqah that will benefit them and most importantly will benefit their father. So I strongly advise that you leave 1/3 as a sadaqah, continuous sadaqah after your demise. So these are the elements that you need to include in your will, and inshallah more details will be explained according to your questions. Jazakumullah.
Jazakallah khair, Shaykh, for that quite comprehensive start. So, Fraz, I want to come over to yourself, just to be able to give us a bit of an idea from a UK sort of legislative perspective. What are the things that we should bear in mind? And one question that's repeatedly come up in what we've gathered is what happens practically if I die without putting an Islamic will in place? And Sheikh's touched on some of that clearly. What would you say about that? And generally, what advice would you give at the very top, at a high level, to everybody listening?
Yeah, Assalamu alaikum. And I was on mute earlier, so Assalamu alaikum to everyone that's listening today, and belated Ramadan Mubarak to everybody. Let's pick on the question first of all, what happens if you don't have a will, and just sort of overlapping some of the things that the Shaykh said about the disputes that arise. First and foremost, if you do not have a will, when somebody passes away, there's a kind of a junction that happens. You either have a will or you don't. And if you don't have a will, what happens is there is legislation in place that dictates exactly what will happen next, right? And the issue with that is, obviously with the Sharia, is that will conflict with what the tenets of the Quran state as to how the assets are to be distributed. So the first and foremost is, if you don't have a will, it's not the end, because there is a process that will happen, but it will conflict with your with your religious wants and beliefs, right? There is a way, because I've had a few questions after the last seminar, there is a way of being able to amend that position posthumously after someone passes away, but it is a complicated process. So I guess the long and short of it is you would have a will drafted during your lifetime. That's the purpose of, I guess, the message today. Then let's move on to the actual will itself. So as the Shaykh said, the highest, he referred to a number of disputes, and I'll tell you from a legal perspective, the highest number of litigation disputes that arise in the courts, and I'm talking across the board, from debt, family, divorce, all of the litigation that you can list, the highest number is probate, meaning where people have left either a will that is it's not clear, or they haven't left a will and there's some sort of claim that comes about. So to get around this issue, you would draft a will, right? So from a legal perspective, Shaykh has highlighted various aspects of what's required within the Sharia will, right? And I'm going to now interplay that with legislation and the English legal position. Okay. First and foremost, you have to identify yourself. That's clear, and there's a way of doing that. I would also always revoke any former document or former will that you might have entered into. Again, in case there is one there laying around, then it would avoid any conflict of interest. So you would make that statement. Then Shaykh identified your burial requirements and declaration of faith. In English law, this is not required, but I would strongly recommend that you do it. If you were abroad on holiday, for example, what happens to the body? Is it repatriated or not? And then the legal position may again kick in. And from a Sharia perspective, the body is to be buried as soon as possible where the person passes away. But then what would happen, for example, if you were, let's say, on business somewhere far away, somewhere that you would not normally go to? What would your wishes be? What would happen if you were, say, for example, performing Hajj, Umrah? Or let's say a lot of us are from the subcontinent, you were back in one of those countries, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, wherever, the Middle East. What would happen at that point? Your family live here. So these are the kind of things I would identify and state to avoid issues. You then need an individual, and I would recommend having 2 individuals at the very least, of someone who will carry out your instructions when you've gone. This person is called an executor. Okay, and it goes without saying, the person that you choose should be somebody that you trust, right? Or people that you trust. And the reason I would recommend having 2 is in case one of them predeceases you. If you put a will in place, and let's say, for example, Wakas, I make you my executor and you predecease me, then my will suddenly becomes invalid. Whereas if I made you my executor, and let's say Shaykh was also my executor, and one of you predeceases, the will would still continue because one of you would still be able to follow my instructions. So I would have a clear, in fact, a legal requirement is to have that clearly cited, identifying who that executor is. And there isn't a requirement to liaise with that person, but it goes without saying, common sense, if I make a will and I make Shaykh and Wakas my executors, I would speak to them. And I don't have to tell them what the content is. I would just say, I have a will. I've made you my executors. By the way, the will is either registered at such and such place, or it's in the top drawer underneath the TV, for example, or wherever, right? So you know that there's a document there, and I've left some instructions. Shaykh talked about asset distribution. A lot of us think about a will, and we think about, what have I got? Who's going to get it? And under the Sharia, it's already predetermined how that distribution is going to happen. So I'm not going to touch on that too much, but I would list what those assets are, because some are obvious. So for example, a property, and some are not so obvious, say a bank account, and you don't know where that bank account is. And the reality is it's not so much just in accordance with the legal position. What you're really doing when you create a will, understand the essence of what you're actually doing. What you're actually doing is resolving or clarifying or avoiding making any mess or leaving any mess behind you when you've gone, right? And so if you list your assets, it has a double advantage. The first is that it's easy for Wakas and Shaykh, they're my executors, to then go and say, okay, we know that he had bank accounts here, there's some jewelry and whatever, right? So then they can identify those, right? But also, more importantly, when somebody passes away in this country, there is an application process, and that process is known as probate. Okay, as part of that process, there is a tax calculation that has to be done, right? So listing your assets makes it easy to identify what the value of those assets are, and then that bundle or that list or that instruction would then go to somebody like Basit, who would then calculate the tax position, and if there's anything can be done to make that efficient. So there's a double reason why I would do that. Now, in the UK, a lot of us own property jointly if we're married, for example, right? And the common position with property being recorded at the land registry is something called joint tenants, right? There are two ways of recording property. One is joint tenants, the other is tenants in common. Now, the problem with this is that a joint tenancy overrides the position of the will, right? So Shaykh will say the will the assets will be distributed in accordance with the Sharia, right? Whereas when we actually go to do the probate, we find out, oh, Fraz owned the property jointly with his wife, and it was recorded as joint tenants, and that position overrides in law what it's stated in the will. And so if the majority of my wealth is parked in the property, you can see where the conflict is going to happen, right? And this is an issue here where, say, for example, people say, can I use a template will, right? You can, but then issues like this, joint tenancies and things like that, they don't get uncovered. And they do when someone's passed away, and then it becomes a big mess, okay? What else is there? Where, for example, the asset's value is over a certain threshold, which is at the moment is 325,000, then we would speak to somebody like Basit about potentially making that estate efficient before that person passes away. And he would consider things like trusts. If your child is under the age of 18, we'd have to consider a trust arrangement anyway, because they can't take ownership of that cash, let's say, and things like that. So basically, we would look at the assets for a number of reasons. Okay, then I would talk about guardianship in the will. Sheikh's already identified that, so I won't go into too much detail. But it goes without saying that if you have kids, don't just assume that it will naturally pass to the parent. You know, the kids may end up in a social system, or even you may not want your child to go to the other parent. Let's say, for example, if you're going through a divorce at the time, right? So you would want to cite that specifically. And then just a couple of short points before I close off. First of all, we live in a digital age, so do consider things like passwords. Sheikh touched upon anything to bequest, right? Anything, meaning you may want to leave a message. So I would consider that within a will. And then finally, the witnessing requirements, right? In law, the requirement for for a will to be valid in English law, it must be signed by the person making the will in the presence of two other people who would also sign that will to confirm that they were present, which, you know, given social distancing and the situation we're in, is problematic. And there are ways around that. So, for example, people could meet, I know I've heard, and I gave this example last time, somebody met at a car park in a petrol station. The will was lodged underneath the windscreen wiper, and the three people sort of stood there. The person signed it, then they rotated around, the next person signed it. If you're extremely vulnerable and you can't leave your house, you could do it on, let's say, one side of a window. You have the document signed, post through the letterbox, then they would witness it. There are talks of this legislation changing, but unfortunately we are still stuck in 1840 when this legislation came about, at a time when people were using thumbprints to identify themselves. And it is essentially there to protect the person making the will. You know what, guys? I could go on and on and on. I can see you're trying to interrupt me to stop me, but I'm ready to stop.
You've actually helped me out in some ways, or stolen my thunder, I should say, by answering a lot of my questions that have come through. So good. I think that's covered quite a lot of the different aspects. Thanks for
Alhamdulillah, brother.
And we'll come back to you because we do have a lot of specific questions that, around the legislative side of things. But Basit, really briefly coming over to yourself, right? So, I mean, there's a saying that before the coroner knocks on your door, the tax man knocks on your door when you have, unfortunately, some sort of, well, there's not, I just made that up. But in any case, the point being that,
off the saying. Excuse me.
What can you tell us very briefly about some of the tax considerations? There are specific questions, and I will get into those a bit later on. But what very briefly should we be thinking about at the very top when it comes to sort of our rules?
I think the saying here is there's two things certain in life: death and taxes. So, you know, when we do pass away, unfortunately, to come for us. I think the issue is, and I guess this is the point that we normally overlook, is that the will by itself doesn't necessarily mean that you avoid inheritance tax. Now, inheritance tax applies on anything above £325,000. So each of us have got an allowance of £325,000. That's essentially our nil rate band, and that's tax free. There's also an additional residence nil rate band, which is £175,000. Now, that only applies, and you only qualify for that if you own your main home, i.e. the house that you live in, and that house has to go directly to one of your beneficiaries. So it has to go to your children, to your spouse. It can't go to, say, nieces and nephews, for example. If it does, we don't get the allowance. So in theory, the allowance can go up to £500,000 per individual, which is £1 million per couple. Now, anything above that, there is, like, say, a 40% inheritance tax liability. But the key point to bear in mind here is, like I say, just the will by itself doesn't mean you avoid inheritance tax. Also, there's a risk that if you are distributing according to Sharia, you can end up with a huge IHT liability. Now, I'm not saying don't distribute according to Sharia. Of course, that's not what we're saying. And of course, our intention should be pleasing Allah first and foremost. And if that means we end up paying a bit of tax, we pay it because we want to please Allah, and that's more important than losing a bit of tax. But hey, if we can avoid paying the tax and leave it for our kids, that's a good option as well. So let's please Allah, which is the priority. And if we can avoid tax in the process, let's do that as well. Now, like I say, inheritance tax is applicable at 40%, 40. So it's akin to half of your life earnings, which will go away. And as I said, you do have those allowances. Now, the reason why I say it kind of doesn't work from a Sharia perspective and being tax efficient is that according to Sharia, your wife, if you were to pass away, can only inherit 12.5%. If there are children, of course, the children, then it's no children, then it's 25%. Husband can inherit 25%. But under UK law, the amount that goes to your spouse is completely exempt from tax. So the common scenario that a lot of planners do is they say, look, let's just write in your will, I leave everything to my spouse. Now, by doing that, you avoid inheritance tax. But we know that that's not Sharia compliant. So the reliefs that are available don't necessarily comply or make it easy for us to distribute according to Sharia. The smaller the estate, and this is where, living a humbler life does pay dividends, because the less you have, the easier it is to pass on. The more you have, the more we're answerable for, the more we have to account for as well. But the less you have, it's easier to distribute according to your allowances. The more you have, obviously, then it's a case of balancing. How much of my allowances can I utilize? How much can I give to my spouse via interspouse exemption? And then how do I deal with everything else? And there's weird and wonderful ways to kind of cater for that. But what I'm personally a big fan of myself is trusts. I think trusts are a way that you can plan. You can draw up trusts in your will. You can even make gifts during your lifetime. So if the plan is, look, I do essentially want this to go to my children, I still want to adhere to the Sharia distribution, you can create trusts and essentially gift your assets, gift properties, gift cash to your kids right now, and bring your estate value below that threshold. Now, where I cited the £1 million threshold, there's another caveat. The problem is when it comes to tax, it's never that straightforward that here's the rule and that's all that there is. If your estate size, for example, is more than £2.2 million, and let's be honest, in London, if you've got a couple of properties, you probably do exceed that, your allowance as a married couple reduces back down to £650,000. So there are, like I say, a lot of kind of caveats, a lot of restrictions. But again, the key thing is, I need a whole session just to explain all the rules. And I know I can't do that justice in the 5-10 minutes I've got right now. But like I say, always seek professional advice. Another thing to bear in mind is, and I get this asked a lot, is when people try to make gifts, they always think, well, look, I just gift my property to my son or my daughter, and that deals with the issue. Well, yes, you can potentially avoid inheritance tax, and provided you survive 7 years, there's no IHT on that asset, but you've got another tax, which is capital gains tax. So again, revenue is basically saying to us, look, we'll give you relief on one hand, don't pay us 40%, but if you make a gift of an investment property, not your home, but an investment property, we're going to charge you 28% capital gains tax on a profit, which is the difference between the current market value and what you bought it for, even though your children haven't actually given you a penny for that property. So again, seek professional advice. That's the most important thing and valuable lesson that you can take from this. There are other allowances. If you have a business, and a lot of our brothers and sisters have businesses, if it's a trading business, you can get 100% relief. If it's a property business, you won't get that relief. So the trade is only if, let's say, I don't know, you're running a pharmacy or a solicitor's practice, a counselling practice, that practice itself is exempt. But if you're a property business, not so much. You can give up to £3,000 every year to any individual. Again, it's a small amount, and that amount hasn't really changed over the years. But again, that is something that you can do. Now, like I say, I'm personally a big fan of trust. There was a famous case back in 2016, and that was of the Duke of Westminster. Now, he died with an estate worth about £9 billion. And if anyone want to hazard a guess how much he paid, I can tell you he paid nothing. Didn't pay a penny of tax. 3.6 billion is what the tax liability should have been, but he didn't pay a penny. Why? Because he had created these trusts. The interesting thing is trust came into our legislation from the Islamic world, but that's for another time. But we created trust, just so you know that. But that's it in a nutshell, inshallah. Do plan, like I say, 40% is the threshold. If your estate is less than £1 million, you can probably just, you can get away with some basic planning. I think there's enough allowances and reliefs available for you there. If it's worth more than that, definitely seek professional advice.
Jazakallah khair, Basit. So a lot of this, there's a lot of information there, as you know. Maybe a lot of this will become a lot more practical and relatable as we go through the questions as well, right? So we'll come back to some of this stuff. Now, just coming to the questions, we have had an amazing amount of questions coming through. So what we've tried to do is just try to bunch, obviously, the repetitive ones up together. There are some questions which may have a Sharia consideration, but also a legislative and a tax consideration. So we'll flip through as we go along. What I will ask is if you can be succinct as possible with your answers, because we know that we're not going to get through to everything here as well. So, Shaykh, I think one common one coming to you first that really we're seeing come through, and it's very important that we clarify this, is around the share that we give to the different people in the will. So some people are asking in lots of different combinations, can I change, if I'm concerned, for example, that my son is not going to look after my daughters who are not married when I'm gone, or if there's any other consideration that we don't get along with a certain family member who is a part of the will, can we change the distribution based on that? And is that allowable, or or can we even? Is there another way around that at all?
Yeah. Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. This is a very common question, and there are so many misconceptions regarding this issue. Brothers and sisters, listen. Once you die, the wealth is not yours. Okay? So whatever you say that you are changing, once you die, that is invalid. It is not in my ijtihad. One time I remember a discussion with some like modernist kind of, so-called scholars or imam. I said to them, see, it is not in my hand. It is not in the hand of anyone. Once you die, you don't have any control over your wealth. Even if you write 100 wills, okay, regarding the distribution of your assets, that is not valid. Yeah? And even if you say that I want my assets to be distributed according to Sharia, this is just because of the legal requirements here. It doesn't mean that your assets now, okay, are distributed according to Sharia from an Islamic perspective. No, you write it, you don't write it, you don't have any control over it. Allah Jalla wa Ala is the one who has control over it. And Allah Jalla wa Ala, as many scholars said, He distributed that by Himself in Surah, mainly in Surah Al-Nisa, chapter number 4. So you cannot change it. That's it. Yeah? All what you have is control, limited control, over 1/3 only. Limited control. What do I mean by limited control? In this third, again, it is a common question. Some people say, I have a control over 1/3, so from this third, I want to give more to this son. He was helping me in my business. Or this daughter, she is a divorcee. Or I had actually last week a case. She said one of the sisters, anyway, it's not a sensitive issue. She said her son is disabled. So she wants to leave more for him. Yeah? So we said no. Yeah? no one, I cannot do any ijtihad to change it, etc. Okay, so what is the way around it? The way around it is to give them a gift now, but provided that the other siblings agree to that. Yeah, brothers and sisters, listen, there is the will, and there is the gift, and there is the inheritance. Okay? The will, the gift, and the inheritance. The gift is effective in your lifetime. Yeah? So I gave my son a gift. It is effective now, not after my death. If it is effective after my death, then it becomes what? It becomes a will. And then we need to look at it whether it is valid or invalid. Now, the gift has some conditions. I cannot, okay, when we talk about gift, briefly, we have gift and maintenance. Maintenance, I should give my children according to their own needs. So there is a disabled child, he needs more than the non-disabled child. The girls, maybe they need more, yeah, jewelry, etc., wedding preparation, etc. The young boy needs less than the old boy. So this is what? Maintenance. Maintenance is to be given according to the needs. Gifts is, or gift is anything above maintenance. That should be, there are two views, okay? Either it should be given equally to all the children, yeah, boys and girls, or it should be distributed according to the inheritance law, where the boys take double the share of the girls. There are two views. Yeah, so you can give your children gift provided that you are witnessing what? Either you give them all the same, or you give according to the other view. Now, if you want to give your child more, okay, without this, then you have to take the permission of all the other, actually, all the other legal heirs, because the other legal heirs might not, or might suffer because you have given this a child more, yeah, and they might think that you have given him more in order to minimize their shares. So you have to take their permission.
Jazakallah khair, Shaykh. Makes a lot of sense. I think there's a gift consideration from the tax perspective as well, Basit. We'll come to that. I think you touched on that as well, that the gift is tax exempt. So that, I guess, our question was answered at the beginning. And just another quick question, Shaykh, I'm going to put to you, but I guess it bleeds into Fraz as well. Do a husband and wife have to write separate wills if their assets are joint? So from a Sharia perspective to start with, and then maybe from a UK legislative perspective, what the impact of that is.
Let us hear from Fraz.
Okay.
Yes, the simple answer to that question is yes, because what you own is what you own. And so at the time of death, that's the point, let's say the line in the sand, you can't give what your wife owns to somebody else. That's hers, right? You can only give what's yours. Quite often there is a mirror will scenario that people try to wedge into the Sharia, kind of, they're trying to make this thing work, and it does work, where during the lifetime of the surviving spouse. So let's give you a real example. I'm married, I pass away, I have a will, and my will says that my assets will be distributed in accordance with the Sharia, right? But I only have one property, right? So if I were to pass, my wife would suddenly suffer some undue hardship because she may have to go sell that property to distribute the estate to the rest of the heirs, the legal heirs. And so what we do is we create a will whereby that my portion of my estate is held by her on trust. And then when she passes away, my estate is distributed in accordance with the Sharia at that point. And then the two wills that we draft, the husband and wife will mirror each other. So depending on which one was to pass away first. And that way you kind of manage not just the financial, but let's say the real on the ground type issues of you know, what are we going to do about the house? You know, we've got to sell it. You know, you get around that type of problem.
Right, Jazakallah khair. Fraz, I'm going to stay with you because this was another question that was coming quite commonly. Can my Islamic will be challenged from a UK inheritance law perspective? And so, if so, how can I avoid this from happening? Any circumstances which can sort of open us up to our Islamic will?
Can the will be challenged on?
From a UK inheritance law perspective? I mean, is there anything that where we may think this is valid, but it wasn't actually valid from UK law perspective?
Okay, so whether or not I guess what you're trying to say is whether the Sharia would be recognised.
Yeah, I mean, could that be superseded if you thought you'd left one?
Yeah, so in English, a will that primarily, if you got it in terms of layers, right? Primarily, it must be compliant with English legislation, right? That's the primary. And some of the points that I discussed in the 5-10 minute, those are the points, right? And then when it comes to the distribution itself, you would then cite how you want it. Now, Shaykh touched upon this, whether or not, you know, you've seen these online calculators, Sharia inheritance calculators, and sometimes you can calculate, this is my calculation at this particular date on the 9th of May, for example. I personally prefer not to hardwire the calculation into the will, because your circumstances change. You don't know when you're going to pass away. And if you create confusion, so in answer to your question, if you create confusion in respect of who the beneficiaries should be, then it's open to challenge. So I would try and clarify all of that by having a statement or a clause in accordance with the Sharia, for example, without hardwiring that in.
Right, Jazakallah khair. Basit, just to yourself, something that came through, I thought two things that you've already touched on. A gift we spoke about. You also spoke about trusts very briefly. I know this is a little bit of a, you know, depends sort of question, but what the question that was coming through is, what is better, a gift or a trust to set up if you're trying to looking at inheritance tax from an inheritance tax perspective?
See, the thing is essentially a gift, whether you do it directly or via a trust. That's the way you would structure any form of gift. Now, things you can make a gift directly, but bear in mind, the only gift I can make directly free of tax, any taxes, is cash. So if I've got large bank savings in my bank account, I can pass it on to the kids. There's no capital gains tax, no inheritance tax. If I'm gifting a property, however, and let's say it's a rental property, now the gift of the rental property becomes subject to capital gains tax. The only way to avoid that is by making the gift via a trust, because then there's reliefs with trust for capital gains tax as well. Again, there are restrictions that the most you can put into a trust as a married couple is £650,000 tax-free. So that's the best way to structure it. So what I would do is look at the underlying asset. What is it that I'm looking to gift? And then decide how to gift it. Now, whilst we're touching on taxes, the other thing to bear in mind is asset protection. That if I gift an asset or cash directly to my children, they get married tomorrow, God forbid, doesn't work out, a divorcing spouse has a right to half of that potentially. But if it's sitting in trust, it's protected from all form of unforeseen circumstances. Therefore, a divorcing spouse, if they've got business goes in liquidation, those liquidators, creditors can't touch what you've put in trust for them.
Right. Okay, Jazakallah khair. Makes a lot of sense. Shaykh, I'm going to come back to you. A few sort of, from a Sharia perspective, questions that came through. Some may have shorter answers than others. Somebody says, for non-Muslim parents and non-Muslim children, should they be included in one's will?
Yeah, okay. Again, this is kind of a common question. We know, and it is the consensus of all scholars, that only Muslims inherit from, from Muslims, yeah? Or Muslims, they can inherit from Muslims and non-Muslims, but non-Muslims, they cannot inherit from Muslims. Now, this is from an Islamic perspective. Now, what if you have your parents, they are not Muslims, or maybe you are alone and you don't have children, but you have brothers, sisters, half brothers, half sisters, okay, and they are not Muslims, then you can include them in 1/3. Yeah, because we said that you have control, limited control over 1/3 of what you leave. Limited control means that you cannot assign it to any of the legal heirs. But if there is an individual or individuals who are not going to inherit, they are not part of the legal heirs community, then you can give them part of this third. Yeah.
Jazakallah khair, Shaykh. Okay, Fraz, question to you, and that has probably a consideration for Shaykh as well, around the executors. So we spoke about the importance of having executors on the will. The question is, can I change the distribution? Sorry, not can I, can I challenge, if I disagree with the executor that my parents left, can I challenge that in a court of law? And get that changed. And I guess we need to know that from a UK legislative perspective and a Sharia perspective as well, if that can be doable. So maybe Shaykh, I'll come to you first, really, because if from a Sharia perspective we can't, then it's sort of the other sort of answer from Fraz will probably become.
Yeah. This is a very good question. Briefly, the executors, they should act in the best interest of the beneficiaries.
Yeah.
Okay. And that the first beneficiary, because he was going to benefit from that in his akhirah, is the one who passed away. So if they are not acting in the best interest, then that can be challenged by anyone, not necessarily by children, but of course the children, they are the closest people who can witness this misuse of power. Yeah. By the way, Faraz, we need maybe to speak about power of attorney. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll let you finish and I'll touch on that.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is that it can be challenged, yes. From an Islamic perspective, I don't know about the legal perspective.
Exactly. Fraz.
Yes. So the question morphed into two. So I'll deal with the first part. The answer is yes, of course you can. The executors are there to fulfill the instructions of the person who's passed away. They have a legal responsibility to follow those instructions. This is where it comes down to the quality of the drafting of the will. And again, I would say, be careful when using templates, because this is where issues start arising, because it's not clear. And then the executor either is confused or he's using his discretion that may not be in the interest of the beneficiary. From the Sharia perspective, what Shaykh is saying is the ethos, the spirit. Yeah. From a legal perspective, what I'm saying is that if the instruction is clear, you can challenge it. Some wills have discretionary trusts built within them. Basit can tell you more about that, but those, just by nature of that label, discretionary trust, means that the executor has discretion in order to when fulfilling those instructions. So the simple answer is yes, because they've got a legal responsibility. I'm just going to quickly touch on the power of attorney Shaykh mentioned. So a will is a document that comes to life when you die. Okay, there are instructions that come into play the moment you pass. The power of attorney Shaykh has mentioned is something called a lasting power of attorney. It's a document that that comes alive the moment you lose capacity, right? A car accident, coma, these kind of things. You're not able to now make your instructions, or even something like dementia, some of these horrible diseases. So you would have to put that document in place, and we always recommend putting the two in place, a will and an LPA. You would put that document in place when you have capacity. It's a relatively straightforward process when you have capacity. So for example, I would appoint my wife as my attorney, and in the event something was to happen to me, from a financial or a well-being perspective, she would be authorized to make those instructions, give those instructions. I've been personally in this when I was a lot younger. My father passed away and I didn't have this in place. And I was trying to get the doctors to do something and they wouldn't let me do it. And at a time when you're really grief-stricken or stressed, it's not the time to have it. So that's the power of attorney point the Shaykh was mentioning. It's called a lasting power of attorney.
Jazakallah khair, Fraz, for that. Now the next question, I'll just read it out first. So it says, my parents intend to give both their daughters one property each, and both their sons 2 properties each. Now the question is, what is the most tax efficient way of doing this? Now this question obviously, Basit, was directed at itself, but just before that, I just wanted to put it to Shaykh just very quickly, that is it sufficient that parents are giving 1 property and then 2 property, because the share being double for their sons and their daughters, or do they have to actually value those properties to make sure that it's equal? So I wanted to just put that to you first and then come to Basit. We can answer the second question after that, but I thought it was important to clarify.
Yeah, good, because No. See, brothers and sisters, ideally, anything the person who passed away, any asset, it should be, or any assets should be accumulated, and that should be distributed according to the Sharia law. Yeah, not what it chose for his children. One property may the value of it might be more than the other property. Maybe the children might not like it, yeah, for whatever reason. So don't do that. That will create even more problems. Yeah. So in a nutshell, it is actually the value.
Yeah. And just assuming, Basit, that the value was something that was correct, what would your brief recommendation be there?
It's a difficult one to answer, is the honest point, because without knowing more information, there's there's not one size fits all type thing, because essentially you're looking at gifting 5 properties. Yeah. So we'd have to look at, well, are there any capital gains tax liabilities, and what reliefs are applicable. I guess the key point to bear in mind is it's doable. All of this is doable. You can certainly make gifts. That isn't an issue. All we have to look at is, are there any underlying tax implications? And the ones that keep recurring are stamp duty and capital gains tax. So stamp duty would be if there's any mortgage in place on that property. If you've got any borrowing, then stamp duty becomes liable on the loan amount, not the market value of the property. If there's a gain, i.e., it's a buy-to-let, and that's the key thing. Your main home is always exempt from capital gains tax. But let's say I bought an investment property back in the 80s for £50,000. Now it's worth 400,000. Well, if you make that gift to your son, that's like a £350,000 gain. That's liable to 28% tax. So we'd probably have to review that. It's definitely doable, but it would just be a case of reviewing what are the tax implications for that.
Right. Jazakallah khair. Okay, Fraz, quick question to yourself about wills that have been written pre-marriage, post-marriage. So if I get married, do I have to rewrite my will? And connected to that, I guess, is if I, for any reason, if my will gets superseded by a following will, how do I ensure that that my latest will is taken into consideration? Do I have to register it somewhere, so on and so forth? Especially if you've done one of your template ones.
Yeah. No, you don't have to. Your will is, once it's drafted, it's valid. So sometimes people draft wills and they just forget about them, right? And then they come into play, and then there's all sorts of horrors come out because the laws change and all sorts of stuff. So you don't have to, but the recommendation is every couple of years you should definitely look at it again and sit alongside a tax advisor and to see whether or not it's still efficient. The second part of your question was registration. Yeah, there's a few do's and don'ts when you've signed a will, right? You don't put it in the bank in the bank safe vault, because in order to access that, I would need your authority, and you've now passed, right? So it becomes a redundant document. I would tell an executor there are places where you can register them. Sometimes the solicitors will hold on to them, and they'll charge a fee. I would recommend that you do get it registered at the probate. There's a registry you can have this, and it costs about £20. And it's just, at least it's there, it's stored. Because when it comes to the probate, you need the original. It must be the wet ink copy, not a photocopy.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, one other question, Shaykh. I guess I'll come to you about debts. Should we specify debts in our will that need to be paid? And in particular, this question was around student debts.
Yeah, this is a very, very good question. A very, very important question. Why do I believe that every one of us must write a debt? Must write the will. Because definitely many of us have debts. Either we owe someone or someone owes us. And brothers, be careful of the debt. And you know that the Prophet ﷺ refused to pray janazah on a person who because he owes someone some money. Abu Qatada. Someone. Until Abu Qatada said, I will pay off his debt, Ya Rasulullah, then the Prophet ﷺ offered the janazah. And there are so many statements regarding the severity and the gravity of this issue of debt, because it is concerned or it is related to the rights of others. So be careful of that. Now, if you have a debt, whether you owe someone or someone owes you, put that in your will so your children will know about it. Yeah? Sometimes your children or your legal heirs, they might not know that you owe someone or someone owes you an amount of money. Okay? This is one thing. Now, with regards to certain debts, such as student loan, don't worry about it, because by law, if you pass away, then it will be waived. Yeah. Also, as I understood, correct me, Fraz or Basit, that even if you borrow someone, which is haram anyway, but I mean, if it happened, yeah, you borrowed a certain amount from the bank, yeah, then you passed away, that will not be transferred to your legal heirs, isn't it? Yeah. So there are.
Well, I just answer that question, Sheikh. I think what happens if you owe money, let's say you borrow money, and it's on a property, then the person owed the money or entity would come after the assets of the estate. They would chase after that money. And so it isn't directly, let's say, my beneficiaries, but it would be denied of my beneficiaries. You follow? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Excellent. Yeah. Excellent point. So, so in a nutshell, the debts that you have to pay, then you have to write them. Some debts by law, like the student loan, okay, it is waived the minute you die, then don't worry about them. Yeah. Okay. Those debts that by law, they are going to be waived. And I don't think that there is any debt that can be waived, debt for other individuals, not other governmental bodies. Yeah, that can be waived. Yeah.
Very briefly on that, Basit. Any allowances if the creditor doesn't come chasing? Are there any allowances that you can claim as part of inheritance tax if you intend to pay back a debt on behalf of somebody who passed, or no?
Sure. I mean, the thing is, when it comes to any form of debt, it's tax deductible. So, even if you're owed a personal debt, so let's say I've lent you £10,000 and I'll protect you something would happen to you, because that is owed to me, that is actually deductible from your estate from a tax planning perspective. So it actually reduces your estate size and there's no inheritance tax on the value of £10,000. So it's not that there's a relief for the amount you're paying back to me. So it's a relief on the actual debt amount itself.
Right. Okay. Good. Okay. I think we might...
Can I ask Basit regarding this? Someone told me, as based on what you said, that this qard hasan, yeah, they said that it is better that after the demise of the person you take it, because as you said, it will be tax free.
Yes.
Rather than leave it and then it will increase the tax. So that is true, isn't it?
Definitely, yeah. I mean, we did a case recently where the brother had borrowed from various siblings, and I think it came to about £50,000-60,000. But like in families, we have our own internal agreements.
Yeah.
It's not always documented. But when the family came forward at the janazah, and I think there was one brother who came forward at the janazah and said, your father owed me, I think it was 10,000 or 6 or 7, I can't remember the exact amount, but he said there was X thousand pounds that was owed. So when we went through the probate process, we actually documented all of this. And we said, look, there was X amount owed to the brothers and then this individual, because they do actually ask in the probate, is there any documentation regarding this? So we always say, and it's an Islamic principle as well, right? Document the agreement you have with anyone you've borrowed or lent money to. Now, in this case, we said, look, this person turned up during the funeral and he said, the deceased owes me this money. They allowed it to be a tax deductible expense. So any form of loan, qard hasan, you've helped somebody out to, I don't know, buy a property, whatever, document it all.
And if it is not documented?
The interesting thing is, I mean, it depends on HMRC. So the case I worked on recently, HMRC agreed on the basis of the family agreeing and the individual agreeing. But normally what HMRC says is that it should be documented. They may ask for proof, sometimes they don't. but sometimes they do. So it's always better, err on the side of caution, have it documented.
And I guess also, in this day and age, money doesn't really move without a footprint these days. So it's less and less likely to be that you can't challenge that if you've actually lent that money.
Absolutely. Good. Well, Jazakallah khair. I'm going to pause there for just a quick couple of minutes to just take us through and share some details on a really exciting opportunity, a fantastic project that's been launched during Ramadan, which is the National Waqf Fund. Let's watch a short video which gives us a bit more information.
What is a waqf and how does it work? A waqf is an Arabic word that means to restrict and devote. In Islamic history, waqf took on the meaning of a pious endowment that would in theory last forever. A person would donate a piece of land, property, money, or even an object towards a pious cause and thereby gain a continuous reward, a sadaqah jariyah, forever giving. The waqf could not be touched and the income gained from it would be reinvested, amplifying its benefits across time. Throughout history, the Muslim world has had an abundance of famous awqaf that supported a variety of institutions and causes, from the well of Uthman radiallahu anh in Medina that provided water to the early Muslim ummah, to universities such as Al-Azhar in Egypt that educated generations of scholars, to the modern hospitals supported by the Vehbi Koç Waqf in Turkey. The Muslim population in Britain is rapidly growing and our current institutions cannot keep up with the greater needs and wants. At the moment, the community's charity model is completely unsustainable and highly saturated. British Muslims donate between 500 million and £1 billion every year, supporting worthy causes across the globe. However, we still face significant challenges domestically and lag behind other British communities in the fields of health, education and wealth. Our ummah will suffer spiritually if we do not change from the current reactionary short-term model to a proactive long-term one that seeks to set the agenda. For more information, head over to nwf.org.uk and follow us at Our Wealth.
Okay, so that's the National Waqf Fund. So one of the things I would really briefly say about this is, I mean, my own personal background is I've been working in finance for almost 2 decades in the city, and one of the most common questions you get, especially when I was in wealth management, was, you know, from investors, was I want something which is going to protect my capital and give me perpetual growth in my return year upon year upon year. And you'd hear it and you'd think, well, that's pretty aspirational. You know, wouldn't we all want something like that? It sounds like utopia, right? But that's exactly what this initiative is offering us, really. If you think about it from a Sadaqah Jariyah perspective, you know, something which secures your initial contribution, your donation, your assets, and gives you a perpetual amazing return year after year, whether you're living or not. And I would strongly encourage a lot of us to find out more about NWF. But Shaykh, a lot of the questions that were coming through actually connected to wills, a huge amount of questions were around the charitable aspect within the will. And what's the best way to deal with that? Is that compulsory? And if so, then what we should do with it? I don't know if you wanted to just sort of give a bit more background around.
If you allow me, you know, brothers and sisters, Waqf is one of the miracles of Sharia. Yeah. And I participated along with Brother Umar in writing an academic chapter in a big book that will be, actually it might be released in the coming few days, about Waqf. Various scholars participated in that. And when I've been interested in this issue of Waqf for a number of years, many years. And every time I search and I find more information about Waqf, I become really amazed how this Waqf operates. And just to cut it short, they say that Waqf is an institution that is independent from the most influential aspects. What are they? The power of the political power and the greed of the business people. So Waqf is a financial institution that is independent from the political power as well as what? The influence of those business people, which is really miraculous. That's why this idea of Waqf, there is a debate whether the Western world has taken this idea from Muslim Ummah during the Crusades. There is a debate from an academic perspective, but this idea flourished amazingly. And in India, there is an institution to list all the awqaf of Muslims. They managed to list more than 500,000 waqfs in India. And they said the number of waqfs that they could not get hold of even is more. They said in the 4th Hijrah century, most of the activities of the caliphate, they were funded by awqaf. To fund hospitals, to fund educational systems, this is given throughout the Muslim history. But now they moved beyond that. They started to fund couples who want to get married, but they don't have access to enough funds. Yeah, they started to fund. Even I came across a very strange waqf that the person who put that waqf to look after homeless dogs, and that was in somewhere in Morocco, yeah, in the 11th Hijrah century. So waqf is a very important institution that will secure the future of the Muslim Ummah, yeah, let alone, brothers and sisters, the reward for that. We all know the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that when a person dies, his actions come to an end, except what? Except for 3 things: knowledge, money, or children. Yeah, knowledge that he spread, money that he gave as a sadaqah, yeah, and a child that he will make dua for him. Now, money, yeah, can be in a form of waqf, and we need to have a balance. Yes, we need to finance the current projects that we have as Muslim community, but also we need to have long sustainability through building awqaf that will keep generating money, okay, and finance for our projects. And subhanallah, I advise brothers to have like a simple direct debit or standing order, even a simple amount. And the brothers who are in charge of this project, may Allah Jalla wa Ala bless them, they will take this money and they will put in fixed assets. It might be £10 every month. You will forget about it, but that will generate money, yes, to finance other sadaqah or other da'wah projects. And that will be really a continuous sadaqah for you, brothers and sisters. You can do that on behalf of, I have experienced many good projects in the Middle East. There were awqaf on behalf of the parents. Yeah, you missed your parents, they passed away, or one of them, or maybe your children, other loved people, then you have waqf on their behalf. So we ask Allah Jalla wa Ala that this project will become really a successful project, and that we benefit from this project. And alhamdulillah, there are a few similar projects like this project. May Allah Jalla wa Ala put barakah in all of them.
I mean, Jazakallah khair, Shaykh. May Allah allow us to recognize an opportunity when it's staring us in the face, inshallah.
Well, guys, can I just add one little point on that as well? It's often overlooked by a lot of our community. I've seen when I do inheritance tax planning is if you put the charity in your will, the amount you give to charity is actually tax deductible. Now, what I have heard a lot of brothers say is, I've already told my children where I want the money to go when it comes to charity. Just like we were speaking about the debt earlier, if you do want to leave it to charity, do put that in the will, just like the waqf we're talking about right now, put that in your will. And also, if you give more than 10% of your estate to charity, I know Islamically we can give up to 30%, but if you give at least 10%, then your inheritance tax applicable, the rate applicable drops down to 36%. So it's actually a 4% saving on inheritance tax against the whole of your estate. So just a bit of a tax-free bit of tax advice there for you guys.
Exactly. Jazakallah khair. Good to know. Okay, I've got one eye on the time. We've got roughly about 15 minutes or so to go. So we're going to go through some more questions again. Request is to keep your answers as succinct as possible and get through as many questions as we can. I guess Fraz, coming to yourself, something you mentioned earlier was passwords, right? And setting a password. So the question that's come through is if you can tell us a little bit more around, I mean, how safe is it to leave passwords, and should we keep a copy with a solicitor, or is that something that we should be giving to the executor, etc.?
Good question. I mean, yeah, obviously, if you put your passwords down, then that's open to someone, I guess, discovering it. There is no requirement. I mentioned earlier on where you put that will, so you don't have to tell anybody what is in the content of your will. I would recommend you tell the executors that there is a will, and then I'd keep it somewhere safe. I'd register it, but you know, it's a catch-22 with GAS. You know, you'd want to leave that identification of how you access those digital assets, and at the same time you'd want to keep that security. So I don't know, maybe you leave a clue. Maybe you leave them, made them one of those, where was I born, or something like that. That type of question. That's my password.
Okay, fantastic, good stuff. All right, Shaykh, coming back to yourself, question is, can a child be left a gift under the protection of an adult if they're young? So within the will, you give a gift to a child, but there's an adult who looks after it until the child becomes of a certain age.
I think this is for Fraz, not for me.
From a Shari perspective.
You leave what, sorry?
So a portion of your will to a child, to a child.
Okay. Is the child one of my legal heirs or not?
Yes, is one of the legal heirs, as far as I understand it.
Okay, and then
under the protection of an adult who will look after that money until the child obviously becomes 18 or above, etc.
See, the child, I cannot, as we said, the Prophet ﷺ said, there is no bequest to a legal heir. لا وصية لوارث. So I cannot decrease the share of the legal heirs. Full stop. So if the child is a legal heir, he will take or she will take part of the assets that I leave. Now, Brother Fraz spoke about the executors. So the executors will look after the execution of the will. That's it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think
one point on that. I think maybe I'm not sure. The essence of what I think what the question, one of the points was in respect of the child not being of because they're not an adult. Is that?
Yes.
Yeah. So in those circumstances, you may want to consider putting a trust in place. And again, this would then overlap into Basit's area. If you know, for example, your children are young, my kids are young, for example, at the moment, I would have a trust set up and say that at such and such age, it would then be distributed in accordance with the Sharia, for example. I'm sure Basit can maybe allude a little further on that.
No, absolutely. I mean, that's the way I would do it. I think the issue is you can't have a transfer of ownership of title to a minor. And it's not uncommon. You know, you'd have a trust. And again, where you're entrusting the executive, essentially entrusting the trustee to look after the asset for you. Probably better to put it in a trust, so that it's kind of a legally recognized, documented vehicle. The trust will have its own set of accounts, so at least that way it ensures all the income is going directly to the kids as well. And again, you know, it's a good form of asset protection. So you can put as guidelines to the trustees that I don't want any capital to be given to my children until they're, you know, mentally capable, or they're of mature age, etc., or happily married. So you can put all those kind of caveats. But yeah, legally you can do that.
Right. Okay.
But legally, if your children are minor, yeah, what will happen? Imagine that you did not specify any executors.
If you did not specify executors, so the executors are entrusted to follow your instructions, right? That's the primary. So the executors would follow the distribution in accordance with what you say, right? But if the child is minor, let's say for example it's a property, they're not even legally allowed to take title of that property. So it would be then responsibility of the executor to then follow that instruction by filling that gap, by putting a trust in place.
And
in
if
order
there
for
are no executors?
If there's no executors, then the will becomes invalid, and then you'd have to go down the intestacy route. So do you remember at the beginning I said there was a fork in the road? If there's no executors, then you're going down the fork in the road that says there's no will, and then there's a process of appointing somebody. So when you're going down that road, rather than executors, what will happen is people, individuals known as administrators would be appointed, and they would then follow through the instructions in accordance with what the legislation says, not the will.
So, sorry. This means that the will not be valid unless there are executors.
Correct. Correct, Shaykh.
In any circumstance.
In any circumstance. There are legal requirements for the will, identification, executors, to be signed in the way that I've described, and so on. Executors is a fundamental requirement for there to be a valid will.
Okay.
Hence the reason why I always recommend having two, not one, just in case one passes away.
Yep.
Okay. So Sheikh, I'm going to come to you, two connected questions. It's quite similar. So a brother says that his dad's property is in his name. It's not his property, but it's in his name.
Yeah.
If he were to die, would he have to distribute it according to in his will or not? And the second one is a sister who says that she was similarly given gold by her parents. And in the event that she dies, she doesn't trust the way it will be used, so she wants to give it back to them, as opposed to distributing it in her will. Slightly different questions, I guess, both in some ways.
Yeah, one by one, because the first question is a very, very important question. Yeah. Okay, let me just mention this scenario, which is not a joke, but I had a case. A family, good family, mashallah, well-educated, etc. Kind of well off, not that, but anyway, reasonably well off. And their son wants to marry someone whom they don't like. Yeah. And they came to me just to discuss this, to convince the son not to get married to that lady whom they don't like. And in their discussion, they were not aware of this. They mentioned, just it came out of their mouth, that they have the family house, which is quite big, yeah, quite spacious one, is in the name of that son. Yeah. Why? Because to avoid tax, whatever. Yeah. So I said to them, by the way, you know, if your son got married to that lady that you don't like, and subhanallah, I remember a case that happened exactly like that, and your son dies, then what? Then you tell me, yes, Basit and Fraz, then his wife will have what? Will have a share on that property. Is that true or not?
Correct.
And I remember the mother, she said, what? She just came from nowhere, and she might have 50% of our house that we've been building. And I said, well, that's it. They said, so what is the solution? This is our property. I said, by law, it is not your property. No, it is our property. I said, by law, it is not yours. Is that true or not? Yes.
It is true. I mean, I'm hedging because there's some legals there, but I'll let you carry on, Sheikh, and then we'll.
Okay, but I mean, on a face value, unless they challenge that.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And they need. Sometimes it can be challenged. Sometimes it cannot be challenged. I know that you can challenge that, but if there is no enough proof, what I wanted to say is that, and it is luckily that the law in Britain, unlike some other Europeans, in Britain you can challenge it, yeah. But in other European countries, the law is what is written. So if this property is under the name of so and so, that's it. It cannot be challenged. Yeah, in Britain, it can be challenged. So brothers and sisters, the point is, don't take this issue lightly. I know that you might be doing that because of some taxation, etc. issues. You need to have enough measures in place in order to challenge that. Otherwise, it will be a long process before the other siblings can get hold of their shares of that property that is not under their name. Yeah. Brother Fraz,
long and expensive, Sheikh. That's,
and
I guess,
yeah.
that's, yeah. So the I think this the key, the essence of what you said at the end is the key, isn't it? Because these situations arise because in reality, it's dad's property, but I own it, for example, or I'm legally owning it. And so the moral of the story is get it in writing. At least put a document in place between you and dad, let's say, for example, that says, actually, I'm holding it for dad. So that when someone like Basit is then calculating the tax, then what happens is he can say, okay, I can rely on that piece of paper and I can have the argument with HMRC.
Yeah. I mean, typically what you can do is there's something called a bare trust that you can draft up in those kind of scenarios. A bare trust arrangement is similar to, say, a bank account that you may have for your children. So the child can't legally go and open up the bank account, but you as a parent may open one up for them. The other common scenario is a parent who helps the child to buy a house and they end up, on the mortgage deed or whatever. They're holding it as a bare trustee. So if you do have that kind of arrangement, very important that you have that document in place. It's a legal document between the owner and who it's intended for. It needs to be witnessed by independent people, and you need to keep that on file. But yeah, that's the only way to manage it. Otherwise, like Shaykh said, wife comes along, or even a husband comes along, and things don't work out, and the worst can happen potentially.
And just let me, brother, because let me take this opportunity to say, brothers, sisters, we have so many cases in the Council, Islamic Council of Europe, that cannot be solved. Disputes over what? Over the inheritance. Yeah, cannot be solved. Simply. Why? Because the father who left it, he put it in someone's name, and that person now is disputing it. And sometimes they put it in someone's name in another country called back home. This is our home, but so-called back home. Yeah. And the law there is different. I have so many cases like this, and I told them we cannot solve it. This is one thing. Another thing, brothers and sisters, please, please, I know that families don't do that. Yeah. Now, the parents, they live in a property, joint or common in, what is it? Joint
tenants in common.
Tenancy in common. You need, and Fraz can advise, to decide what is better, joint tenancy or tenancy in common, because that will affect how things will be distributed after your demise. Yeah. And brothers, sisters, now, if this property, if it is tenants in common, now, does my wife or does my spouse or does my husband owns 50% of it or what? Similarly, I had a case of kind of wealthy family, and the wife was helping the husband. The husband got married to another lady, yeah, secretly. And then to cut it short, the wife said, no, actually I was helping him as a partner in the business, so I want my share. So decide that, write it down. This property we are living it, family house, what does it mean? Who owns it? Okay, tensions in the properties. The child, for example, he wants to get married, maybe in the back, the garden, or they can have an extension. That extension, the child, yeah, he is the one who financed it, etc. Did he finance it for himself, or is it going to be part of the family property, or was it a loan that he was given to his parents, or was it an investment? Please, I know, brothers and sisters, that you might not take that seriously, because now all of you are lovely, doubly together. But when the parents die, the relationship becomes a different type of relationship, and that might cause friction, disputes between siblings. You know, of a family, they have not spoken to each other maybe for the last 20 years. They came last Eid, they just want, actually the nephew came, and because of this, because of disputes over inheritance. Yeah.
Okay. So Basit, bear taxes, sorry, bear taxes, that sounds like something from South London. Bear trusts is something that we were going to ask you about, but you've already answered that question. But a sister asked a question. She's a single mother, and she says that she feels like she's disadvantaged because she misses out on the 650 allowance. Is there anything that she can do about that, or is it just a case of not like that?
Do bear in mind the 650 is for a married couple, so she still has the 325,000 allowance because that's per individual.
Yeah.
You own your own home, you've got the 175 on top, so it can go up to 500,000.
Right.
The reality is it is a bit restrictive. If you're a single parent, if you're a sole individual, then the options for planning are restricted. There's a lot more options as a married couple because there's a lot of kind of things we can do on death by trusts and spouse exemptions. But unfortunately, yeah, you are, it's a tough scenario, but it's very difficult to plan around that, I'm afraid.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, cool. Fraz, question for yourself. The will, does it have to be put together in one go from a UK legislation perspective, or can you do it in sort of, I guess, stages? So, for example, you put the basic will together to start with, and you put the estate management piece together later. I don't know if you can say anything about that, but that's come
process. Let's just talk about process. Maybe that might help. So what happens is we receive an inquiry, and the first thing we will do usually is either have a face-to-face, or we'll send a questionnaire by email to do a fact find, right? And we'll try to establish how much of the estate is worth at that particular moment in time, and any other complications. There may be Sharia questions that may come out, and if that, at that point, once we gather that information in, if, for example, there are Sharia questions, we'll go to ICE. We'll go to Shaykh or one of his colleagues and just put the brief together and say this is the problem, and then we refer the client there in order to establish the answer to that. And at the same time, if we can see that we are facing a large tax liability on the estate, then we'd refer to someone like Basit. And then what Basit would do is analyze, put together some form of tax advice, and then he would write. The client would have engaged him. So on behalf of the client, he'd write to me and say, this is the plan in order to make the estate efficient. Now, at that point, it may be that I might have to rearrange some of the ownership of the assets, or write gift deeds or trust deeds or things like that, right? Once those things are put in place, we would then draft the will, and then we would go through that process of then sending that over to the client and then getting executed. And then if they want it registered, would have it registered. But it would be in that order.
Right. Okay. And just a follow-on question from that, does the executor have to be a British national if you're in the UK, or can it be someone?
No, it can be anyone, but someone that you trust.
Someone that you trust. Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Just final few rounds of questions before we sort of go into the closing comments. We had a pretty good discussion and lots coming through still. Jazakallah khair for everybody for participating until now. So, Shaykh, there's a lot coming through around the waqf. A lot of people are asking if you can put together a waqf specifically for your family, or is it something that we should be doing beyond that and bigger than that? How would that work? Any sort of advice around that?
Yeah, you can have both. Okay, you can have waqf general, okay, for everyone, and you can have waqf for the family. Yeah, but provided that you don't use the waqf for the family to change the inheritance law. Yeah, okay, this is a very important condition. It's not a loophole. There is no loophole in Sharia. But you can have a waqf that, okay, the generated income of this waqf to be distributed to poor people, to students of knowledge, to finance, healthcare system, etc. And you can have waqf. Okay, this waqf, I want it to be the generated income to be distributed among the poor people of my offspring. Yeah, that can be, yes.
Jazakallah khair, Shaykh. I'm going to give you one more question before I go to Fraz and Basit's last questions and closing comments. If your children were born out of wedlock, would they be within your inheritance?
Yeah.
It's come up 2 or 3 times now.
Yeah. This is, brothers and sisters, this is a very complicated matter. Yeah. And that's why we need bodies like this council, Islamic Council of Europe, that you can come to in order to have an official, I mean official from a Sharia perspective, not legal perspective, like verdict whether those children are yours or not yours. Yeah, not all children out of wedlock are not yours. Not all children who might be born in a different way. There are so many complicated issues here. Yeah, just don't take any statement from me now. You need to come with your specific question, and then we need to give you a judgment on that, because it is very, very sensitive and very delicate.
Yeah, exactly. So Faraz, my last question to you, I guess, is just rounding off something that's just come up so many times around template wills and what's the best template will online, and is it really necessary for us to get a solicitor involved? I know you've touched on that a bit throughout this conversation, but just in your closing comments, I thought that would be a good way to sort of give us, and anything else that you might want to give us advice around. So, you know, the importance of sort of coming to somebody who knows about these things from a UK BST.
Can I? Yeah, I've just written the question down. I just wanted to touch on something the Sheikh said before about married out of wedlock and what have you. From a legal perspective, an English legal perspective, the child would still be that. It would still be the father would still be the father, right? That doesn't change. And just despite what the Sharia ruling may be, that person may bring about a birthright claim. So you need to be conscious of that, right? That if you're trying to cut people out or that kind of thing, you know, because the child wasn't born in marriage or whatever, just throw that into the space so that people are conscious of that people can bring about a birthright claim after someone passes away. Template wills, look, they exist, regardless, they're out there on the internet, and you know, people use them. We had a discussion with ICE, in fact, about whether we should even have a template will put on the site. And our worry with that is not so much that, look, I can say, no, I'm not going to give you a template will. There are hundreds of them online. You'll go and find one, right? Why am I giving a warning to ICE as to not putting one on the site? Is because I'm concerned that people will use them and make mistakes. It's like, you know, whenever I'm ill, I go onto Google, and what's wrong with me is the worst thing that's possibly, you know, because I don't know what I'm doing, right? So, you know, I would strongly recommend people do not use a template will. Things like joint tenancy, tenants in common, right? It's a complicated area, ownership of property and how that's held. Or, for example, tax planning. If you've got very little, right, then yeah, okay, maybe use a template will. Or if you're on a limited budget, maybe that's the thing to do, is to use a template will. But it is your last instruction, Wakas. You know, and even the cost that we charge, for example, for a will, we don't actually make much money out of it, or any, in fact, for that matter, because of all the regulatory requirements to get the file open. So I wouldn't go cheap on something like your will. It's your last instruction.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Fraz. I can vouch for having seen firsthand when a will hasn't been maybe done as required, the pains that it leaves the ones that are left behind with. And as you said, it's the last thing you want in that circumstance as well. So it's far more prudent to do it the right way. So, okay, Jazakallah khair, Fraz. And maybe Basit, a common theme that was coming through, unsurprisingly, is just that, not the concern is a strong word, but just the whole point about the difference between a Shari will and the tax efficiency of a normal will. Just very briefly, I know you've spoken about this throughout as well, but just some closing comments and some peace of mind that there is a solution. And obviously, as you said at the very beginning, the operative point is that we cannot compromise on the Sharia will, just because you get tax benefits otherwise. But anything you might want to say about that, just to close off, and that would be useful.
No, absolutely. I mean, truth, that proved to be one of our biggest challenges when we looked into kind of the Islamic wills and how to make them tax efficient. But it's doable. I mean, what we've kind of structured now is you can actually create a trust in your will. It's a kind of trust that typically is used by a couple to kind of safeguard the surviving spouse from care home fees. So I can technically leave my property I can give it directly to my wife, or I can leave it in a trust. And then if, God forbid, she needs support tomorrow, the care home provider comes to us and says, you've got to liquidate all your assets. She can say, well, look, half of it belongs in a trust and I own the other half, so you can't enforce a sale. So we've looked into that. We said, well, look, there's a way by utilizing the same structure that the entire estate can actually go into that trust. You can name your spouse and your children as the beneficiaries, and the assets can actually be distributed via that trust. Essentially, it's a life interest trust within your will. That proves to be the most tax efficient way from a Sharia perspective. Now, that way you can avoid the tax and you don't fall foul of Sharia. But again, like I say, because I always say try to do things during your lifetime, because what that will do is it will protect you on first death. But then when the second spouse passes away, and this goes back to the question the sister asked about, well, if I'm by myself, what can I do? The reason why I said it's difficult is because I've got this piece of planning that I always think of when I think of a married couple, that I can certainly cater for it on first death. But when the second partner passes away, all they have is the allowance, and then we're ultimately paying taxes. So it's important that, we do some planning. But also, I should add as well, and I think this is a point we forgot to mention during this session, is when it comes to marriage, the legal recognized marriage here in the UK is the civil marriage, or the registration marriage. Guilty as charged, even I, to be honest, only did that after 17 years, just this year myself before the lockdown started. It's something that we overlook, and unfortunately the nikah by itself, unless the imam who solemnized the marriage is registered and the mosque is registered with the local registry office, it's not actually recognized under UK law. So do make sure you are legally married, get yourself registered, and then there's the planning can come into effect via the will, and then you get all the reliefs between husband and wife.
And unless your wife came from, what were you saying?
Unless you're from back home. Yeah.
Back home.
Yeah. Sorry, this is home.
And I'm going to apologize if you could hear my 2-year-old screaming in the background. It's occupational hazard these days. It's one of the things that's part and parcel. But in any case, so Jazakallah khair, really, for a tremendous conversation. Fraz and Basit, really insightful aspects that you brought, and obviously Shaykh as well. Really appreciate everything that we've been able to go through in this conversation. There are some aspects that we haven't been able to go through as well. Before I go to that, and before I do closing, Shaykh, I'm going to come back to you to just give us some words, inshallah, to round off the conversation and to take away.
Yeah, first of all, I would like to, mention our brothers, Muslim Central UK. They have been very helpful. May Allah Jalla wa Ala is a good Muslim community in Kent. Yeah,
brothers from Ebbsfleet, right?
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Okay. So may Allah Jalla wa Ala reward them. May Allah Jalla wa Ala help them for whatever they are doing, and may Allah Jalla wa Ala, protect them. And I'm really very happy that they are not isolated there, or they want to be in touch with all of us, and they are doing, mashallah, good, fantastic jobs there. Yeah, just as a closing remarks, brothers, subhanallah, and one point related to Ramadan and one point related to the will. First of all, Ramadan is moving very fast. Today is what? Subhanallah, 16th of Ramadan.
Wow.
Yeah, moving very fast. Brothers, sisters, if you've been lazy in the first part of the month of Ramadan, don't be lazy in the second part of the month. What is coming is more important than what passed. And this is out of the mercy of Allah Jalla wa Ala, because sometimes we might become lazy and etc. until we get into the mood. Now we are in the mood. Let us capture those nights that are left for us. And remember, in the coming nights, we have Laylatul Qadr. Laylatul Qadr is better than 1,000 months. I don't want to go into the details how it is calculated, and it is really uplifting when you remember just one thing, that anything you do in Laylatul Qadr will be what? It will be multiplied by 60,000 times. So I recommend that you give sadaqah on every night, not in one night. Every night give some sadaqah, yeah, even if it is £1, because you will be giving it back on the day of resurrection as if you have given it as what? 60,000 pounds. Imagine if you give £100, imagine how much that will be. It will be maybe million or 600,000 pounds worth of sadaqah. Yeah. So please, brothers and sisters, try to boost your iman again in order to put maximum effort in these coming days. This is one thing. Regarding the will, brothers and sisters, alhamdulillah, wallahi, our Muslim community, we should be proud of our Muslim community. And we are going back to our deen, discovering our deen. Not only that, but reconnecting with our deen. Encourage others to be more aware of their deen, to write their will, to take this matter seriously, yeah, and to study this matter more. This is what I wanted to say in the closing remark. May Allah Jalla wa Ala reward all of you. Brother Basit from tax, yeah, Brother Fraz, Saracens, may Allah Jalla wa Ala reward all of you. And the past, may Allah Jalla wa Ala reward you. The brother behind the scene from Islamic Council, yeah, may Allah Jalla wa Ala reward you. Brothers and sisters, all of you. This normally we thank those who organize the event, but those who attend the event are the actual people who made it successful, because if they were not there, then there will be no event. So may Allah Jalla wa Ala reward you, brothers and sisters. Assalamu alaikum.
Jazakallah khair, Shaykh. And again, Jazakallah khair, Fraz and Basit as well. Now, brothers and sisters, many of you had sent lots of questions in. As you can tell, in an hour and a half, we've tried to get through as many as we possibly could. But there are open questions. And as you can understand, we can't deal with intricate questions in this forum. So for that, I would strongly recommend you get in touch with the Islamic Council of Europe, have a conversation with one of the scholars that are there who can guide you more on your specific situation. I would say get in touch absolutely with Saracen solicitors. We've had a bit of a taster from Fraz, and he's given us his time. I can tell you, as somebody who's personally benefited from Saracens, that they're excellent, alhamdulillah, in whatever they do. So get in touch with Saracens for more information around the legal sides of things. And of course, Basit has made a really good case for kinetic tax here as well. So if there's any further questions around your estate planning, get in touch with kinetic tax. Inshallah, between these three organizations, you should absolutely be covered with everything you need as far as your Islamic will is concerned, and may Allah make it complete and accept it from us. Just a quick word around the advice line, CALM. It's the COVID advice line for Muslims. Basically, any questions that you may have during this, the uncertainty, quote unquote, of the COVID time, even to do with your will, give us a call, ask the question, inshallah, Monday to Friday, 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. You will have a qualified person to be able to answer your questions. So remember to do that. And again, that's from the Islamic Council of Europe. Do remember, inshallah, to go to the Islamic Council of Europe website, have a look at all that we have to offer, inshallah, in terms of the plethora of services that we have. Again, I don't say this lightly. I think, organizations such as ICE are the cornerstone of Muslim communities. And really, the value of these you will understand once you need them, right? And we shouldn't wait for that time. We should be proactive in really sort of putting ourselves at the forefront of supporting these organizations, right? So for the work that they're doing for the benefit of the community. And that in itself is sadaqah jariyah, inshallah, that we take away. So make sure in the month of Ramadan, alhamdulillah, as Shaykh said, we're coming up to the last 10 days, go to the ICE website. If you want to donate, and I would urge you to donate, it's donate.iceeurope.org. Make sure that you become a part of this khair as well. Again, jazakumullah khairan to all our panelists, jazakumullah khair to all of you who have participated and making, inshallah, this a success. And again, we thank you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam.